A Song of Ice and Fire is a story that is deeply critical of the social trends of its world building. The author criticized, among other things, medieval misogyny, male primogeniture inheritance laws, prejudices against illegitimate children, and more. However, this criticism often falls on deaf ears, and the readers tend to accept these arbitrary, harmful rules as almost divine in nature, often disparaging those who go against them. So, why does the audience care so little? As always, remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. If you have any other observations that you feel weren't included, feel free to point them out in the comments below. Also, make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. The world of Westeros is full of wars and conflicts. The main series mainly deals with a war between the Starks and Lannisters. The Starks are clearly the ones that have been wronged. Joffrey Baratheon flippantly causes a war by beheading Ned Stark over what is believed to be treason, calling his true paternity into question. The North announces its independence, and the Lannisters do everything to prevent that self-determination, resorting to violence, intimidation, and abuse. While there are sympathetic characters among the Lannister camp, all of them ultimately uphold the genocidal Lannister hegemony. As such, it's clear who is in the right and who is in the wrong. We, as the audience, should root for the Starks and abhor the Lannisters, even if both of these factions resort to violence and unleash terror upon the innocents in Westeros. Yet somehow, that logic is never applied to another conflict, happening only a century and a half before that, when Rhaenyra Targaryen, King's chosen heir, is usurped by her younger half-brother Aegon, specifically on the misogynistic inheritance precedents. Most of the kingdom supports her claim. Her team is full of charismatic people. We are beaten over the head with just how much misogyny was involved in this war, even drawing parallels between an ancient story of the Amethyst Empress, whose usurpation at the hands of her brother caused the Long Night. Similarly, after Aegon challenges Rhaenyra's claim, the resulting fights cause dragons to go extinct, magic dies out, and another long night looms over the continent, without dragons there to defend the kingdom. While the Lannisters have sympathetic characters, hardly anyone in the Green faction is sympathetic or worth rooting for. Through the war, it is overwhelmingly Aegon's Green faction that unleashes senseless violence on the common people, in Tamleton, Bitterbridge, and the Riverlands. But the audience's reaction to this clearly gendered conflict is to apply the lens of enlightened centrism. See, both Rhaenyra and Aegon were equally bad, nobody is worth rooting for, and you miss the point if you sided with anyone. Think of the common people, war is always bad. So why are Starks, who are clearly in the right, justified in going to war and announcing independence, but Rhaenyra, usurped on the basis of misogynistic precedents, is not? Why do we take a centrist approach and invoke the author's anti-war views only in that specific case? Nobody says that Robb should bow his head and accept that his father was killed. Similarly, nobody says that, well, maybe every Targaryen roasted a guy in his own armor as his son was strangling to death, but their families should have just sat idly and let it happen because war is bad. Think of the common people. Yet in the case of Rhaenyra, people insinuate that she should have done exactly that. Just accept that there was no way for her to ever be a queen because of something she has no control over. Just accept that her son was slaughtered as a peace envoy. Just accept that the information about her father's death and her usurpation was withheld from her and eventually caused her a traumatic miscarriage. Just accept that her brother's only claim to the throne was based on his sex, because war is bad. And that includes straight up ignoring the fact that if the common people were genuinely harmed, it almost exclusively came from the hands of the Greens. In fact, there were cases in which Rhaenyra's Black faction alleviated some of their suffering, for example when Lord Stoughton asked for assistance when his peasants were getting slaughtered by the Greens. The narration of the War of the Five Kings gives far more attention to the crimes of Robb's loyalists than it does to the crimes of the Blacks in Fire and Blood, even though Fire and Blood is a historical source that is specifically biased in favor of the Greens. Yet even the Hightower loyalists who wrote this book in universe cannot deny the sheer scale of violence unleashed on the small folk by the Greens. Often it's outright denied that this war had a misogynistic tint to it, and even if it is acknowledged, it's shrugged off and treated as not that big of a deal. It's ignored how the Andal inheritance laws have been getting cemented before, how all of this was perfectly avoidable, how the Greens are clearly aggressors, just like the Lannisters, while the Blacks are the wrong, retaliating side, just like the Starks. The reasons for this state of things are twofold. Firstly, most of the audience are men, and while there indeed exists a substantial portion of male fans that are aware of the social implications of the dance, just as many are completely apathetic to the violence done to Rhaenyra and her family solely due to her gender. Just as many unquestionably buy into the narration and propaganda around her about how she deserved this because she expressed sexual autonomy and birthed alleged bastards, or because she was not an effective ruler once she did take King's Landing, while dealing with the loss of two sons and the Greens stealing all the money, mind you. They scrutinize her body and sexuality just like the Maesters do. They may give empty platitudes to the fact that Fire and Blood is biased because someone else told them that it's biased, but other than that, they remain unaware that the volume is biased against the Targaryens. They unquestionably buy into the narration against her while remaining completely apathetic to the misogynistic violence inflicted upon her, rarely if ever pointing out that she gets humiliated in a misogynistic way, even in death. Her breast of all things is cut in order to rouse some fire. The second reason why that happens is because the Targaryens are involved and that particular family is held to a completely different moral standard than other houses, mainly because so much supplementary material has been written about them, and as such we get a fuller picture of them as compared to anyone else. Without having a clear point of comparison, they might seem worse than everyone else. When you get a detailed description of many Targaryen kings, including the worst ones, as compared to a few sentences about how the Starks ruled the North with an iron fist for 8,000 years, extinguishing many bloodlines, and arrived at the continent in order to eradicate its indigenous population, you might be led to believe that the Targaryens are worse, simply because the rest aren't fleshed out enough to know this. That is also a partial explanation as to why Targaryens in particular are scrutinized for engaging in the things other families are allowed to do with impunity. Any other house can engage in conquest or wars born out of simple self-serving interests, but when the Targaryens do it, it seems to be emblematic of everything wrong with feudalism and absolute monarchy. Many times, intentionally bad faith arguments are used against Targaryens and Targaryens alone. How, for example, the conquest of Westeros was colonialism, an opinion held by a large portion of the audience, while completely ignoring that the entity called Westeros was a settler state centuries before the Targaryens ever looked west. We also see this in the treatment of present-day characters, how Daenerys Targaryen is scrutinized and believed to be insane for resorting to violence when about every character in the story does so, often for far more self-serving reasons than Dany. Dany's perception in the fandom is, of course, going to be projected on the entire house as well, amplified by her gender, since Jon Snow or young Griff, also alleged Targaryens, are never held to that standard. It is not a stretch to assume that this double standard to House Targaryen is rooted in the character of Daenerys Targaryen. Why is Dany a princess and not a prince? I made this choice a long time ago, but I think I wanted to play a little with gender roles and reverse things a little. And of course, Mother of Dragons, to my mind, is much better than Father of Dragons. There is the connection between the woman who brings forth life carrying a huge power of death, fire and destruction. There are very powerful metaphors in there. How did you construct the character of Daenerys? I started with the concept of having the exiled former kings who had been driven some time away across the water trying to regain their throne, and right from the first I found Dany more interesting than Viserys. So I wanted to play with that and also show a frightened girl becoming a powerful woman, coming into her own power and slowly realizing that. Per George R.R. Martin himself, Daenerys has a role in the story that would normally be reserved for a man, an exiled monarch amassing power to reclaim his throne. The audience, however, dislikes that gendered subversion precisely because Daenerys is a woman occupying a role that would normally be reserved for a man. They feel discomfort at the mere prospect, hence they believe that this gendered subversion must be reversed. In order to do that, they try to force Dany into a typically feminine role, a woman corrupted by power or a woman sacrificed for a man's heroship. Perhaps the most common prediction for Dany is that, following her choice to deal more ruthlessly with her enemies, she is destined to succumb into madness, will commit some atrocity, and will be killed by someone, usually by Jon Snow. That her father was mentally ill is a nice bonus that helps justify that prediction. Whether that atrocity will be intentional on her part or just an accident is up for debate, as are the exact details of Jon killing her. Some insist that it will be like in the show, where he kills her to prevent her from any further distraction, while others make a more sympathetic portrayal, in which she practically begs him to kill her in order to forge a magical sword. Both of these predictions reinforce the discomfort that Dany causes. Because she has a masculine role, one subconsciously feels the need to force her back into a feminine role. And there exists an eons-old precedent in fiction of women who turn into mad hysterical bitches, just as there exists eons of precedent in fiction of power-corrupting women. Both function as cautionary tales about women's ambition and reinforce the idea that the best way for a woman to be is to remain a passive object. There is a material incentive to peddle such a narrative. It is there to keep them subjugated and obedient. In order to justify that choice, one has to look for clues in the narrative of such an imminent atrocity, and the only thing that can be used for that are the things that other characters do as well, thus denying Dany the privilege of possessing any moral ambiguity whatsoever, even if she is by far the only character to resort to violence solely in the defense of other people. While men in asoiaf are allowed to burn people alive for their personal gains, Dany burning slavers is considered foreshadowing of her madness. That too is a gendered pattern. Due to a belief that women are inherently better, more nurturing and more empathetic, any woman who strays from that ideal is considered worse than any man who would. False Meadows sums it up well. We think of men as anti-heroes, as capable of occupying an intense and fascinating moral grey area, of being able to fall and rise and fall again, but still be worthy of love on some fundamental level. Because if it was the world and its fallings that broke them, then we surely must owe them some sympathy. But women aren't allowed to be broken by the world. Or if we are, it's the breaking that makes us villains. Wronged women turn into avenging furies, inhuman and monstrous. Once we cross to the dark side, we become adversaries to be defeated, not lost souls in need of mending. Which is what happens when you let benevolent sexism invest you in the idea that women are humanity's moral guardians and men its native renegades. Because if female goodness is only ever an inherent quality, something we are born both with and to be, then once lost, it must necessarily be lost forever, a severed limb we can't regrow. Whereas male goodness, by virtue of being an acquired quality, something bestowed through the kindness of women, earned through right action or learned through struggle, can just as easily be gained and lost multiple times without being tarnished, like a jewel we might pawn in hardship, and later reclaim. This quote can be easily attributed to both book Dany and show Dany. Show Dany's turn towards villainy in the second to last episode was so total that there was no turning back from it. The writers bought into these ideas verbatim, which is why they wrote Dany committing an unspeakable atrocity and justified it with her unapologetic rise to power as a woman. Justified it by the morally grey or even morally bad actions that she took while never once applying this standard to any man in the series. Because they too felt threatened by Dany reversing the gendered standard imposed on her and punished her for it. The same is never true for men. Nobody says that Stannis burning people means he is going to turn mad, while Dany using fire as an execution method means she's evil. Nobody says that Jon executing Janos Slynt is evil, while Dany executing the Tarlys in Season 7 is used as foreshadowing of what she is going to do in Season 8. It's even framed that way by the cinematography, music, and how the characters react, even though Dany is the one to offer choices, while Jon does not offer any. Once Janos Slynt refuses to follow an order, Jon is relentless in his decision to execute him and ignores Janos' pleas for mercy, all while Stannis clearly approves of this, thus portraying this act as harsh justice. At the same time, Dany offers those who surrendered to return home after they pledged loyalty to her. When Randall and Deacon refuse, she offers them to join the Night's Watch, and they refuse as well. Only then does she execute them, and Tyrion shoots where it looks in her direction, giving the audience a clear hint that she is wrong and isn't supposed to do this, even though she clearly offers them more mercy than Jon has ever offered to Janos. That's because Dany isn't supposed to be here. She isn't supposed to command armies or execute justice. Another precedent is that the best way to punish a woman for her unwomanly ways is to have her partner kill her. All while even the most evil male characters rarely get removed in this way, if they are removed at all. Walter White dies on his own terms, Anakin Skywalker turned Darth Vader dies on his own terms and even gets a chance at redemption. Such grace is never extended to women. If a woman goes too far, there is no point of return for her. That the showrunners even wrote that situation is proof of this, because they could have just as easily written Dany burning King's Landing, but then allowed her the grace of redemption in the fight against the White Walkers, but they did not. They specifically needed a cautionary tale about women who dare to hold power. As Meadows says, women aren't allowed to be broken by the world. Or if we are, it's the breaking that makes us villains. Wronged women turn into avenging furies, inhuman and monstrous. Once we cross to the dark side, we become adversaries to be defeated, not lost souls in need of mending. Predictions for Book Dany aren't any better. They either insinuate that the show version of events will more or less play out the same, or offer an alternative. Dany will burn King's Landing and will redeem herself while fighting the others, usually through death, and that death is also at Jon Snow's hands. Dany will be so desperate to erase the scene of her burning King's Landing, even if it's accidental, that she will practically beg Jon Snow to plunge a sword into her breast so that he forges Lightbringer. What helps is that in universe there exists a story of a man killing his wife in order to forge a magical sword, so of course that has to happen as well, even though it directly contradicts the words of Dany being a gendered subversion, because in fantasy it's Azor Ahais who killed their Nissa Nissas to forge magical swords, but in asoiaf it's Dany who's Azor Ahai and Drogo was her Nissa Nissa. It is of no consequence to the readers that it's Daenerys who fits the prophecy to be Azor Ahai reborn, that she sacrifices the life of her loved ones to forge a metaphorical sword, her dragons. The assertion that we never looked for a girl because girls aren't supposed to be heroes is completely lost on people, because Dany cannot, under any circumstances, remain that gendered subversion. She must, by the very end, be forced into a feminine role. Of a mad hysterical harpy corrupted by power completely and irreversibly, or a woman who dies so that a man can be a hero. As Maester Aemon says, no one ever looked for a girl. It was a prince that was promised, not a princess. Rhaegar, I thought. The smoke was from the fire that devoured Summerhall on the day of his birth, the salt from the tears shed for those who died. He shared my belief when he was young, but later he became persuaded that it was his own son who fulfilled the prophecy, for a command had been seen above King's Landing on the night Aegon was conceived, and Rhaegar was certain the bleeding star had to be a comet. What fools we were, who thought ourselves so wise. The error crept in from the translation. Dragons are neither male nor female. Barth saw the truth of that, but now one and now the other, as changeable as flame. The language misled us all for 1,000 years. Daenerys is the one, born amidst salt and smoke. The dragons prove it. If you ask someone who's never seen Game of Thrones about the show, chances are that you will be told two things. It's the show that had a horrible ending, or it's the show where everyone dies during weddings. Be it Dany's wedding to Drogo, where, per Dothraki tradition, a wedding without at least 3 deaths is considered a dull affair. Or the iconic Red Wedding scene, where Robb Stark and most of his men are slaughtered at his uncle's wedding. Or Joffrey's death on his own wedding feast. Or the slaughter during Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding in the prequel, House of the Dragon. Why are bloody weddings such a recurrent theme in this story? It is a subtle metaphor of how marriage in this feudal world is a tool of violence against women. It seems like getting married is the worst possible thing that can happen to a woman, and the horror is amplified by its inevitability. Since through marriage, houses extend their power and influence, rendering women into objects, bargaining chips, bridesmaids. Even the wedding ceremony in which men undress women before they are delivered to the martial bed seems like glorified sexual assault. While there are instances of arranged marriages ending up stable and happy, that seems to be an exception, not the rule. 15-year-old Lysa is prohibited from marrying someone she loves and forced to abort her baby against her will, and then is married off to a man in his 50s, causing her to spend her entire life in misery. 13-year-old Dany is married off to Drogo and raped every night by him, and even after she establishes some agency in that relationship, she still cannot deny him sex even while heavily pregnant. Robert quickly turns abusive towards Cersei and starts raping her. Rhaenyra is raped and abused by Aerys. Rhaenyra is forced to marry Maegor in order to save her daughters, and he also rapes her. Daenerys, sister of Daeron, is forced to marry a man 15 years her senior to secure Dorne joining the Seven Kingdoms, even though she loves someone else. Daenerys is raped and abused by Aegon. Ramsay forces Lady Donella Hornwood to marry him, and he starves her to death. Later, Ramsay tortures and rapes Jane Poole, posing as Arya. Sansa is forcefully married to Tyrion, and only his refusal to consummate the marriage saves her from rape. These are all women at various levels of highborn station, yet even that does not protect them from sexual violence. All of them are married off when they are barely in their teens. Yet any time such discussions are had, people tend to shrug it off. Such were the times is a most often repeated mantra, a quite baffling one considering that it's a fictional story and while it is set in a pseudo-medieval world, cries about historical accuracy are only ever invoked when sexual assault is concerned. Nobody goes around insisting that even the nobles in Westeros should have ugly teeth. Nobody points out that fatness should be seen as a sign of wealth and vitality instead of stigmatizing it. Girls being married off at 13 and 14 in medieval times is also a myth. While a betrothal between two nobles could have been performed even between toddlers, the average age of marriage in Western Europe was actually mid to early 20s. And even if indeed there were cases of people marrying younger, it was the exception, not the rule. And even disregarding all of this, and even if all of this was true, such were the times does not mean that it was okay and not worth criticizing or completely shrugging off, especially since George R.R. Martin is a pretty apt critic of patriarchy. But unfortunately his criticism fly over everyone's head, since it's easier to just insist that such were the times and we shouldn't care. As if times being like this is a justification for the violence unleashed on women, both lowborn and highborn. I never held much with slavery. You can't just go using another kind of people like they wasn't people at all. Know what I mean? Got to end sooner or later. Better if it ends peaceful, but it's got to end, even it has to be with fire and blood, you see? Maybe that's what them abolitionists have been saying all along. You try to be reasonable, that's only right, but if it don't work, you got to be ready. Some things is just wrong. They got to be ended. This is a line from Fever Dream, a story written by George R.R. Martin in 1986. From this line alone, one can easily deduce George R.R. Martin's thoughts on slavery. This stance should be a no-brainer for any remotely decent person. Martin goes to great lengths to show the horrors of slavery through his books. I've told Icar he ought to make for Meereen, Ser Jorah said. They will pay a better price than he would get from a slaving caravan. Illyrio writes that they had a plague last year, so the brothels are paying double for healthy young girls and triple for boys under 10. If enough children survive the journey, the gold will buy us all the ships we need and hire men to sail them. They are chosen young, for size and speed and strength, the slave told her. They begin their training at 5. Every day they train from dawn to dusk, until they have mastered the short sword, the shield, and the 3 spears. The training is most rigorous, your grace. Only 1 boy in 3 survives it. This is well known. Among the Unsullied, it is said that on the day they win their spiked cup, the worst is done with, for no duty that ever fall to them could be as hard as their training. Tell her that these have been standing here for a day and a night, with no food nor water. Tell her that they will stand until they drop if I should command it. And when 999 have collapsed to die upon the bricks, the last will stand there still, and never move, until his own death claims him. Such is their courage. Tell her that. A bull is strong as well, but bulls die every day in the fighting pits. A girl of 9 killed one not 3 days past in Jotiel's pit. Say the unsullied are not men. Say that death means nothing to them, and maiming less than nothing. He stopped before a thick-set man who had the look of Lazar about him, and brought his whip up sharply, laying a line of blood across one copper cheek. The eunuch blinked, and stood there, bleeding. "Would you like another?" asked Krasnus. "If it please your worship." Krasnus moved to the next eunuch in line, a towering youth with the blue eyes and flaxen hair of Lys. "Your sword," he said. The eunuch knelt, unsheathed the blade, and offered it up hilt first. It was a short sword, made more for stabbing than for slashing, but the edge looked razor sharp. "Stand," Krasnus commanded. "Your worship." The eunuch stood, and Krasnus Monaclos slid the sword slowly up his torso, leaving a thin red line across his belly and between his ribs. Then he jabbed the sword point in beneath a wild pink nipple and began to work it back and forth. "What is he doing?" Danny demanded of the girl, as the blood ran down the man's chest. "Tell the cow to stop her bleeding," said Krasnus, without waiting for the translation. "This will do him no great harm. Men have no need of nipples, eunuchs even less so." The nipple hung by a thread of skin. He slashed and set it tumbling to the bricks, leaving behind a round red eye, copiously weeping blood. The eunuch did not move, until Krasnus offered him back his sword, hilt first. "Here, I'm done with you. This one is pleased to have served you." Krasnus turned back to Dani. "They feel no pain, you see." "How can that be?" she demanded through the scribe. "The wine of courage," was the answer he gave her. "It is no true wine at all, but made from deadly nightshade, bloodfly larva, black lotus root, and many secret things. They drink it with every meal from the day they are cut, and with each passing year feel less and less. It makes them fearless in battle. Nor can they be tortured." In Yunkai and Mirin, eunuchs are often made by removing a boy's testicles, but leaving the penis. Such a creature is infertile, yet often still capable of erection. Only trouble can come of this. We remove the penis as well, leaving nothing. The unsullied are the purest creatures on the earth. Men, yes, but not unsullied. Plunder interests them no more than rape. They own nothing but their weapons. We do not even permit them names. No names. Danny frowned at the little scribe. "Can that be what the good master said? They have no names." "It is so, your grace." Krasnus stopped in front of a Giscari who might have been his taller, fitter brother, and flicked his lash at a small bronze disc on the sword belts at his feet. "There is his name. Ask the whore of Westeros whether she can read Giscari glyphs." When Dany admitted that she could not, the slaver turned to the unsullied. "What is your name?" he demanded. "This one's name is Red Flea, your worship." The girl repeated their exchange in the common tongue. "And yesterday, what was it?" "Black Rat, your worship." "The day before?" "Brown Flea, your worship." "Before that?" "This one does not recall, your worship." "Blue Toad, perhaps, or Blue Worm." "Tell her all their names are such," Krasnus commanded the girl. "It reminds them that by themselves they are vermin. The name discs are thrown in an empty cask at duty's end, and each dawn plucked up again at random." "More madness," said Arstan when he heard. "How can any man possibly remember a new name every day? Those who cannot are called in training, along with those who cannot run all day in full pack, scale a mountain in the black of night, walk across a bed of coals, or slay an infant." Dany's mouth surely twisted at that. Did he see, or is he blind as well as cruel? She turned away quickly, trying to keep her face a mask until she heard the translation. Only then did she allow herself to say, "Whose infants did they slay?" To win his spiked cup, an unsullied must go to the slave marts with a silver mark, find some wiling newborn, and kill it before its mother's eyes. In this way we make certain that there is no weakness left in them. She was feeling faint. The heat, she tried to tell herself. You take a babe from its mother's arms, kill it as she watches, and pay for her pain with a silver coin? When the translation was made for him, Krasnus Monaclos laughed aloud. What a soft mewling fool this one is. Tell the whore of Westeros that the mark is for the child's owner, not the mother. The unsullied are not permitted to steal. He tapped his whip against his leg. Tell her that few ever failed that test. The dogs are harder for them, it must be said. We give each boy a puppy on the day that he is cut. At the end of the first year, he is required to strangle it. Any who cannot are killed and fed to the surviving dogs. It makes for a good strong lesson, we find. Ask her if she wishes to view our fighting pits, Krasnus added. The Oakhorse pit has a fine folly scheduled for the evening. a bear and 3 small boys. One boy will be rolled in honey, one in blood, and one in rotting flesh, and she my wagger, on which the bear will eat first. There were no bronze statues here, only a wooden platform where rebellious slaves were racked and flayed and hanged. The good masters placed them so they will be the first thing a new slave sees upon entering the city, Missandei told her as they came to the plaza. At first glimpse, Dany thought their skin was stripped, like the dorsals of Drogo's Nye. Then she rolled her silver nearer and saw the raw lead fresh beneath the crawling black stripes. Flies and maggots. The rebellious slaves had been peeled like a man might peel an apple, in a long curling strip. One man had an arm black with flies from fingers to elbow, and red and white beneath. Dany reined in beneath him. What did this one do? He raised a hand against his owner. The great masters of Meereen had withdrawn before Dany's advance, harvesting all they could and burning what they could not harvest. Scorched fields and poisoned wells had greeted her at every hand. Worst of all, they had nailed a slave child up on every milepost along the coast road from Meereen, nailed them up still living with their entrails hanging out and one arm always outstretched to point the way to Meereen. Leading her van, Daario had given orders for the children to be taken down before Dany had to see them, but she had counter-commanded him as soon as she was told. I will see them, she said. I will see every single one, and count them, and look upon their faces, and I will remember. By the time they came to Meereen, sitting on the salt coast beside her river, the count stood at 163. I will have this city, Dany pledged to herself once more. Now every person with a heart who would read these accounts would be appalled and would applaud Dany for her attempts to destroy that institution. For the most part, this isn't what happens though. Dany is crucified for the fact that her solutions are imperfect and that her disruption of the slave trade causes chaos across all of the continent. People complain about the fact that she dared to ruin the sacred economy. People believe that her burning phrases or nailing the masters of Meereen as retaliation for them mutilating of slave children is foreshadowing of her madness. They believe she is going to slaughter innocent people in King's Landing because in her last chapter she realized that trying to compromise with the slavers will never work and that she needs to give them fire and blood. In saying these things, the fans explicitly side with the slaving elite of Essos, who use the same exact arguments to disregard her. If blood is what you wish, let it flow. I am told you have freed your eunuchs. Freedom means as much to an unsullied as a hat to a haddock. He smiled at Grey Worm, but the eunuch might have been made of stone. Those who survive we shall enslave again, and use to retake as tabor from the rabble. We can make a slave of you as well, do not doubt it. There are pleasure houses in Lys and Tyrosh where men would pay handsomely to bet the last Targaryen. He clapped his hands, and 2 of his escorts came forward, bearing a heavy cedar chest bound in rose and gold. They set it at her feet. 50,000 golden marks, Graznan said smoothly. Yours as a gesture of friendship from the wise masters of Yunkai. Gold given freely is better than plunder bought with blood, surely. I say to you, Daenerys Targaryen, take this chest and go. I have a gift for you as well. She slammed the chest shut. 3 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, send out your slaves. All of them. Every man, woman and child shall be given a weapon, and as much food, clothing, coin, and goods as he or she can carry. These they shall be allowed to choose freely from among their master's possessions, as payment for their years of servitude. When all these slaves have departed, you will open your gates and allow my unsullied to enter and search your city, to make certain none remain in bondage. If you do this, Yunkai will not be burned or plundered, and none of your people shall be molested. The wise masters will have the peace they desire, and will have proven themselves wise indeed. What say you? I say you are mad. Graznan Mo'eras pointed a finger. You shall root this arrogant whore. These little lizards will not keep you safe, I promise you. We will fill the air with arrows if they come within a league of Yunkai. Do you think it is so hard to kill a dragon? Your Radiants enjoyed my dancers. Would it surprise you to know that they are slaves, bred and trained in Yunkai? They have been dancing since they were old enough to walk. How else to achieve such perfection? He took a swallow of his wine. They are expert in all the erotic arts as well. I had thought to make your grades a gift of them. By all means, then he was unsurprised. I shall free them. That made him wince. And what would they do with freedom? As well give a fish a suit of mail. They were made to dance. Made by who? Their masters. Perhaps your dancers would sooner build or bake or farm. Have you asked them? Perhaps your elephants would sooner be nightingales. Instead of sweet song, Meereen's nights would be filled with thunderous trumpetings, and your trees would shatter beneath the weight of great grey birds. Xaro cited. Daenerys, my delight, beneath that sweet young breast beats a tender heart, but take counsel from an older, wiser head. Things are not always as they seem. Much that may seem evil can be good. Consider rain. Rain! Does he take me for a fool or just a child? We curse the rain when it falls upon our heads, yet without it we should starve. The world needs rain. And slaves. You make a face, but it is true. Consider Karth. In art, music, magic, trade, all that makes us more than beasts, Karth sits above the rest of mankind, as you sit at the summit of this pyramid. But below, in place of bricks, the magnificence that is the queen of cities rests upon the backs of slaves. Ask yourself, if all men must grub in the dirt for food, how shall any man lift his eyes to contemplate the stars? If each of us must break his back to build a hovel, who shall raise the temples to glorify the gods? For some men to be great, others must be enslaved. Meereen is a free city of free men, a poor city that was once rich, a hungry city that was once fat, a bloody city that once was peaceful. His accusations stung. There was too much truth in them. Meereen will be rich and fat and peaceful once again, and free as well. Daenerys, let me be honest with you, as befits a friend. You will not make Meereen rich and fat and peaceful. You will only bring it to destruction, as you did Astapor. This arrogant child has taken it upon herself to smash the slave trade, but that traffic was never confined to Slaver's Bay. It was part of the sea of trade that spanned the world, and the Dragon Queen has clouded the water. Behind the black wall, lords of ancient blood sleep poorly, listening to their kitchen slaves sharpen their long knives. Slaves grow our food, clean our streets, teach our young. They guard our walls, row our galleys, fight our battles. And now when they look east, they see this young queen shining from afar, this breaker of chains. The old blood cannot suffer that. Poor men hate her too. Even the vilest beggar stands higher than a slave. This dragon queen would rob him of that consolation. They even buy verbatim into the slander the slavers share among each other to discredit her. Sweet, Cavo laughed. If even half the stories coming back from Slaver's Bay are true, this child is a monster. They say that she is bloodthirsty, that those who speak against her are impaled on spikes to die lingering deaths. They say she is a sorceress who feeds her dragons on the flesh of newborn babes, an oath-breaker who mocks the gods, breaks truces, threatens envoys, and turns on those who have served her loyally. They say her lust cannot be sated, that she mates with men, women, eunuchs, even dogs and children, and woe betide the lover who fails to satisfy her. She gives her body to men to take their souls in trial. They say, said Haldon, by they you mean the slavers, the exiles she drove from Astapor and Meereen. Mere calumnies. How different is this paragraph from the she's a mad queen because she frees slaves prediction? People go as far as to say that this is how everyone in Essos thinks of her, even though it's stated right here that this is what the slavers think. The matter is far different when it comes to the freedmen. I am no lady, the widow replied, just vulgarous whore. You want to be gone from here before the tigers come. Should you reach your queen, give her a message from the slaves of old Volantis. She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek, where her tears had been cut away. Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon. As House of the Dragon was airing, the character of Alicent Hightower reached far more popularity than I expected her to, since I only knew Book Alicent, who isn't necessarily a likable character. But the specific reasons for why she gained that popularity puzzle me to this day. It seems like what her fans like about her the most is the suffering she is put through, expressing borderline glee and delight at it. That usually materializes itself by how much they love the "where is duty, where is sacrifice" line. About every Alicent fan blog who will probably have this line as their header, they will reblog 10 gifs a day with the scene where she says this, hailing this line as undeniable truth. This is usually coupled with their obsessive hatred of Rhaenyra, even if they might pretend to ship Rhaenysent. They believe Rhaenyra has so much privilege over Alicent that the poor Hightower girl is basically a proletarian hero as compared to Rhaenyra, that both of them are highborn ladies born into immense wealth notwithstanding. Rhaenyra is called a spoiled brat because she refuses to get married, while Alicent is praised for enduring her husband's rape and being a good, obedient, dutiful wife. It is of no consequence that Rhaenyra's refusal to get married is explicitly linked to the way her mother died, but even if that wasn't the case, it's still a pretty messed up idea to peddle. Rhaenyra is said to get away with everything because she dared to express sexual autonomy and isn't lashed for it, while Alicent gracefully endured her duty and sacrifice. All of this serves to reinforce Alicent as the only proper woman, someone worth emulating, someone who is the moral one between the two of them, that it's only expected of women to endure gendered violence as their duty. But that duty and that sacrifice is enslavement. Duty and sacrifice that Alicent alleges to exists to keep women downtrodden and exploited. Duty and sacrifice exist so that women can be married off as bridemares the moment they have their first period. What's good in upholding it? These days everyone and their mother claims to be a feminist, yet such base-level analysis of the situation flies over their heads. It's good that Rhaenyra expressed the most basic sexual autonomy. It's good that she rebelled against the prospect of marriage, and it's all that more understandable when you know that her father butchered her mother to get a male heir, and she knows that this could reasonably happen to her as well. It's good. It's good to rebel against enslavement. And Alicent and Rhaenyra are far from the only women to be involved in such rhetoric. The fandom seems to have a fetish-like obsession with women who did their duty without complaining, while, at the same time, crucifying any woman who dares to escape it, even if it's in a limited capacity. There is a particular brand of obsession with minor female characters who are long dead precisely because of the gendered violence they endured without complaint. People focus more on Elia Martell, a minor, long-dead character, than her very much living and active niece Arianne, writing sermons about how she must have been the most dutiful, gentle, and amazing woman, and how terrible was her ultimate fate. When the character of Rhaegar is discussed, it is always in the context of how much he mistreated his dutiful wife and how miserable she must have been because of it. Elia has very little personality and you can project just about everything on her. It's always the image of a dutiful, angelic and sacrificial woman that people choose. Why not make her personality much Oberyn, especially considering what little we know of her? Rhaegar taught her about the prophecy, the Dornishmen were allied with Rhaegar at court through her. Why not make her an active player in the conspiracy to overthrow Aerys? Believe it or not, a similar situation happens with Lyanna, even though in her case we know more about her personality. Nonetheless, she is often portrayed as passive in the situation with Rhaegar. Some insist that Lyanna must have been kidnapped and raped, even though the only person to express that belief is Robert. And even if it's accepted that it was her choice to run away with Rhaegar, some insist that she must have regretted this, that she realized at some point that Rhaegar completely disregarded her as a person and only used her as a vessel for a third head of the dragon, which is also contradicted by the words of the author, who calls him a love-struck prince. So Lyanna is reduced to a little helpless martyr, who made a mistake, was imprisoned in a tower and likely raped either way, rather than someone who made a decision and stood by it till the end. Just as common is the juxtaposition of Lyanna against Elia, because poor Elia did her duty and sacrifice, while Lyanna refused to get married to Robert and ran away with someone she actually loved, so she is a slut and a home wrecker. It is also pretty common for people to claim that they only liked Daenerys in the first book, but began disliking her in every book that followed, because a Game of Thrones Dany is at her most vulnerable, while in the following books she actually holds power and defies the expectation put on her to be a quietly suffering martyr. It is not a coincidence that all 5 major narrators of this story, while highborn, are otherwise outcasts. Tyrion is disabled and treated as a monster and disparaged solely on the basis of his disability. His father prevents him inheritance and despises him because of said disability. Bran, while born abled, becomes disabled and needs to deal with mockery related to it. Arya, while a highborn lady, does not fit the ideal of feudal womanhood, and she spends much of her arc posing as a lowborn boy, seeing the horrors of war through the eyes of a peasant. Jon, in spite of growing up in the castle of a high lord, is an illegitimate child and deals with that stigma his entire life. Dany is an exiled princess who spends most of her life homeless. The story does much to criticize the oppression these characters face, yet instead, the readers seem to accept the established rules of the universe as fact, hailing the virtues of traditional femininity and putting characters who fit it on a pedestal. But by far the strongest manifestation of that is the subject of legitimacy and illegitimacy. Bastards can't inherit is a mantra usually used with regards to Jaehaerys, Lucerys and Joffrey Velaryon, who are alleged to have actually been fathered by Harwin Strong. While the book leaves the matter much more vague, the show is abundantly clear about their paternity, and this is often used to discredit Rhaenyra as a potential ruler of Westeros because her eldest child cannot inherit the throne due to alleged illegitimacy. That he is considered legitimate by just about everyone but the Green faction is irrelevant. That, for example, Lord Manderly did not have problems with betrothing Joffrey to his daughter in spite of the rumors is irrelevant as well. It's not even entirely true that bastards can inherit. They can be legitimized, and if they are seen as legitimate by, for example, a king, then the issue of biological parenthood does not matter. Even if the event does not happen, Jace ascends and some rebellion breaks out, he literally has a dragon to defend his rights. Not only that, but Jace proves himself to be a capable heir to Rhaenyra, and that is acknowledged even by the Green supporting maesters. Should an inheritance be precisely about whether someone will be a good ruler, the expectation put on Rhaenyra and Laenor to have biological offspring, even though he is gay, is emblematic of the violence of arranged marriage, both for him and for her. The stress to produce offspring in spite of one's desires or preferences is something abhorrent. It quite literally enforces martial rape on both of them, just to fit conventions of the world. Bastards face stigma solely because their parents were unmarried. How arbitrary and silly is that, especially when we look at it through our modern lens? In some countries, most children are born out of wedlock, and nobody runs around insisting that they should not be able to inherit their parents' homes. So why do we apply this reasoning to a world where we have the foreknowledge of just how stupid the system is, and when we are shown the pain and suffering the stigma of illegitimacy causes, for example to Jon Snow? And much like in the case of Dany and Sansa's wishes to reverse the gendered subversions she finds herself in, many people want to take away the core aspect of Jon Snow's identity, his illegitimacy. People desperately want to find a loophole in which somehow Jon's parents actually married and he's a rightful heir to the throne. Even though we would have to jump through 1,000 hoops to make it happen, and it would actually cheapen the story and make it cliché. Oh yeah, this guy who thought is a bastard is actually a legitimate heir to the throne. I've never seen this before. The point is, the system that relies on strictly enforcing feudalism is a flawed one, and illegitimacy playing such a big role is a big aspect of it. It is unknown how much George R.R. Martin engages with the fandom. He is aware of some popular essays, and some of the discussions surrounding the show must have reached his ears. He must be aware that Dany's anti-slavery crusade was used as a justification for her Mad Queen turn in Season 8, yet he never spoke a word against it, nor did he take a firm stance about his fans who craft such theories for his books as well. The sheer scale of misogyny, slavery apologia, and other reactionary tendencies warrant him making some clearer statement. Even if it's not outright shooting down some theories, then at least him making a clear statement that he does not condone this. Something like this would at least partially mend these tendencies. Until then, such theories and such readings of his works will continue to run rampant. Thanks for watching. Are there any other criticism of bigotry that completely fly over the heads of readers? Tell me in the comments. And remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video.